Hello, Cam followers. Aren't we lucky? We have got the lovely, lovely Mark Lowrie to come back to join us. I think this is your third visit with Cam now, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yes. So he's here tonight to talk to us about the power of the smartphone helping with neurological diagnosis in your dog. Now, you're going to think, isn't this a page about arthritis? Well, we will clarify why this is an important topic in a bit. But first of all, I'm going to blatantly advertise our member zone. Now, for you guys that don't know, CAM is independent, it's completely self-supporting. We rely on taking funds to keep going. Okay, so we're not a government supported organization, we're not part of a corporate, we're completely self-driven. The member zone for £25 a year, not a month, a year, you will have access to incredible content to better manage your case. All of the Facebook Lives that we've done since 2017 are in there. Tools, downloads, resources, articles, and a lot of the content is provided by amazing people such as Mr. Mark Lowrie, who is one of our CAM advisors. We have 20 global experts and specialists helping us create this resource for you. So please support CAM, step off of this Facebook Live straight in and sign up to our member zone so that we can keep going and supporting you. Right, now that's over and done with, we can crack on. Mark, tell everybody about yourself.
Yeah, well, if people have met me before, I've changed a bit. And if people haven't met me before, I'll tell you where I'm at. So when I last spoke to you, I was in a different role. So recently, the exciting news for me is I've started a new job at a new practice. Now, by a new practice, I mean brand new. It's a practice in the Northwest that's focusing very much on neurology and orthopedics. So a brand new referral hospital. It's independent, which I think is a big plus. And yeah, so we're seeing referral cases in orthopedics and neurology, which I know for CAM viewers is, well, that's what we're all about, isn't it? Musculoskeletal and all of that stuff. So it's called Movement Referrals. It's just off the M56 in Cheshire. And we're ready to help dogs and cats everywhere. We help cats too, even though it's kind of canine arthritis management. We'll bring cats in, but we do both of that. And that's what I'm up to at the minute. So I'm very busy. I think we're on week 7. I'm losing track. We've only been open a few weeks. So really exciting.
Who are your colleagues so people can go, wow?
Yeah, so you may know many of them. I think some of them have been on CAM in the past. So we've got John Innes, who was professor of orthopedics in Liverpool and worked for a number of years at a large corporate group as the referral lead. So he's been in charge of referral operations in that practice, but now he's joining us. So the two of us have come together with Ben Walton, who's another orthopedic specialist. He's well known for implants and doing that sort of thing with dogs. So he's good at designing them. He works with Fusion, which is a veterinary company that sort of helps build plates and things to help fix these dogs. And the third individual is someone else I know who's been on a CAM Live, is Mark Morton. Another
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, he's on it too. So, and of course, he's good. If you've seen his CAM Live, he's good at, he's all about clinical governance. Now, that sounds really boring. And I'll tell him that because I tell him it's boring, but actually I find it fascinating because clinical governance, the simple thing is it's our way of checking as vets we're doing everything well. So it's making sure that if we do an operation, we want to check it gets the outcome we're expecting. And what he's done, and I'm not really qualified to speak about it, but in cruciate disease, in cruciate ruptures in dogs, there's various techniques to fix cruciates. And I suppose the TPLO is one of the big procedures that's meant to be very good. But what he's started is a canine cruciate registry, which is backed by the RCVS, which is, they're doing it with him. They're our big organizing governing body. And all that we're doing is we're getting data from all the dogs that have these procedures everywhere, all over the country, all over the world. So we can find out how well dogs are getting on after this procedure. And for us personally at Movement, we want to take this because I think it's good for people to know. I mean, if an owner's got a dog with cruciate disease and they want it fixing, there's so many places you can go nowadays. And like you've got specialists, you've got advanced practitioners, you've got GPs. There's like 3 levels you can get. Now, what you want to do really is, and people say, one may be better than the other, but what's better than that is there will be individuals that do their job really well. And if they can report the results they get from surgery, a bit like we get with doctors, with people, you can find out how successful they are with their surgeries. It allows you to choose where you want to go with your dog. You go, well, this person's got a great rate of fixing, low rate of infection. And so this can happen with the cruise ship registry. So Mark's there really to help give us kind of objective data on how well we're doing. So we don't just say we're good, you can prove how good you are. So the data speaks for itself. So yeah, those three bring a lot more. And then I'm just there as the neurologist. So
Yeah. Well, what we'll do is we'll crack on with proving that that is completely wrong. Can you please clarify why we're talking about the neurological dog? Because people are going to be like, I don't understand. I thought it was about arthritis. Just kind of expand people's understanding how there's a big overlap.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. So I'm very aware that arthritis as a diagnosis gets dished out a lot.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean it's not common. It's very common. That's why we're here. But I do think there are occasions when dogs are labeled with arthritis and they don't have arthritis, they have something else.
Yeah.
Now, you could do a whole week on talking about what that something else might be. But I think that something else is often neurological. And a great example I'd give, I was out walking with some friends the other week, and this dog came running towards me while I was chatting to one of my friends. And it turns out it was a 14-year-old border collie, and it was running towards me, and it looked really sort of drunk and was falling to one side. And it's kind of, obviously getting around, but it was having difficulty. And I sort of looked at the dog and I thought, oh my goodness, that must have a neurological problem. Now, the reason I knew it had a neurological problem was because it looked drunk. I mean, as simply as that. It wasn't drunk. I should say that still, but it did. Bless it. Left. And as I went past, I sort of thought, oh, maybe I should do something to help that dog. But I was busy chatting to my friend. And before I knew it, the person I was chatting with went, oh, hi, how are you? And they knew the owner of this dog coming towards me. And so he didn't know I was a vet. So I was now very much in disguise, just keeping quiet, listening to the conversation. But of course, him as a non-vet noticed there was something wrong with the dog. So he inquired, he said, oh, what's up with your dog? And this owner said, well, my dog's been diagnosed with severe arthritis. And so they said, we're on all these different pain relief stuff. So, all the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, gabapentin, all of it.
Yeah.
Partly I was sort of thinking in the back of my head, well, this isn't arthritis. Now, it's a 14-year-old border collie. So I don't deny the dog has arthritis. I'm sure it does, as do many of us. If we're over 18, we've probably got a degree of arthritis. But what I found interesting was that was the label the owners had been given to try and manage the dog's problem. And so it was being managed as an arthritic dog, when actually it was very apparent there was something neurological going on. Now, in the end, I managed to sort of put in a few words to make sure they saw the right people so that dog could get sorted in another way. But it's a great example that old dogs with changes in their gait get described as arthritis.
Yeah.
And actually, so many of them have neurological problems. And that's what hopefully with what we're doing tonight, we can maybe give a few tips about what it is we're looking for that maybe move us away from arthritis and make us think this is neurological. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'll just substantiate that because we get messages from the public daily. We do our best to try and answer any message that's on a thread, a direct message, whatever it might be. And I had a lady that contacted us and said, but I am following my vet's dosing regime. I am giving the medication. I am giving it on the frequency that they suggest, and nothing's changed. My dog's no better at all. How can you help? And as you say, you have to write, well, blah, 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 loads. There was a text, but one of the possibilities is the diagnosis is wrong. So if you're using these interventions appropriately and you've seen no change, you need to rethink. And I think a lot of people get lost in the kind of treatment journey. I think there is a real ravine where you go in, you see the vet, you get prescribed, and then you disappear. And there really needs to be a check-in. So all of us vets, however much we like to pretend we could fall to a misdiagnosis, but reassessments is there to try and safety that. And if we had a dog that came in 3 to 4 weeks after being prescribed an anti-inflammatory and the dog was no better at all, I think you would need to start thinking, have I missed something? So, okay, my next thing was we wanted to just do a few more of those cases. I love the one about the border collie, the drunkenness. What's another kind of classic thing that you see?
God, I could come up with loads, but
well, go for it.
Well, let's do one at a time. But the first one I'd mention, because I think this happens in people a lot, is tremors. So if you get a dog with tremors, if you see a person with tremors, I remember Angela Merkel. I remember she was at some event. Sorry, this is a bit random now, but she was at some event presenting something, and it was noticed that she had a tremor. And I remember on the news, everyone was like, Angela Merkel's got a tremor. This is terrible. You know, what could it be? What's wrong with her? And actually, they're worried about pain and things. But tremors, we always, I mean, it's really common for people to see a tremor and think my dog must be in pain. But they're never painful. I'll tell you now, tremors are never painful. It doesn't mean the dog isn't painful for another reason. But if you've got a true tremor, that isn't pain. Now, by a true tremor, I literally mean, a tremor is something where you've got literally very, very high frequency waves. So it's not like a jerk, like that's not a tremor. I'm talking like literally oscillating movements like that. And if you see a tremor such as that, I can't think of a time that would ever be painful, wouldn't be arthritic. And so there's something else going on. Now, what could it be? I mean, God, there's so many things a tremor could be. You know, you can get them because, I mean, they can just happen with old age. It can be a cognitive decline thing. And so with people as they age, they get a bit of a tremor, and dogs get the same thing. You can get tremors from disease of the brain. You can get tremors, completely benign tremors. A common one would be older dogs. So it's called an benign old dog postural tremor. There's lots of different ways of saying it, but these are older dogs, typically Jack Russells, but any breed, where on their back legs you'll just see them sort of shaking, and it's very, very regular, very intermittent. When it's seen, a lot of those dogs will get labeled as arthritis because it's true, we see a tremor and we perceive it as pain. But I go back to what you said, Hannah, because if you then put that dog on a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, you know, you pick an ibuprofen type medication, if that dog was painful, you'd expect a significant change in how the dog's behaving. So the tremor would go, or the dog would move around more freely. But in these cases with tremor, if you put them on an ibuprofen type drug, they don't improve. They'll be exactly the same. And there's nothing wrong with trying that. You know, I've got no problem with that. But then 2-4 weeks down the line, we need to check in again.
Yeah.
And we'll find these dogs just don't seem painful. So look out for a tremor. But at the same time, the things I would mention, you do get something called a myoclonus. Now, that's a fancy word for meaning a whole jerk of the body. It doesn't have to be the whole body. It could be a part, but like a jerk-like reaction. And something we do see in dogs, if they've got intense neck pain, you can see sort of twitching of the muscles, and it can sort of radiate down a front leg or both front legs. Now, that isn't a tremor. That's a jerk. It's myoclonus, and that can be painful. That can be evidence that there is a trapped nerve, or there's some pain causing a muscle to spasm. That is something that, you know, when we see that again, that's not going to be arthritis. That's going to be something that's causing pain. And with ibuprofen or a similar medication, you'd like to get some alleviation. Now, if you've ever had really bad back pain and you take ibuprofen, we know that's not going to work brilliantly. It will take a tiny edge off, but it won't be brilliant. So the dog's still going to be painful, but you would like to think you're going to see some slight change in the dog's behavior for the better. It might be really subtle. It might just be that it's happier to kind of sit next to you, or your dog's happier to have a cuddle, or whatever it might be. But you'll notice some very small improvement. So
I'm going to just in here because it's such a perfect opportunity. So I've got a friend called Ian, and Ian runs the local pub. That's why I know him really well. He's the landlord, and he's got a dog called Bono, and Bono's 16, and he's a little black terrier. And I dog sat for him this Friday. I'm going to make him watch this. Yeah. And his dog, when you go near him into his peripheral vision, he does a myoclonus. And it lasts no more than a second, but it's almost like it's just about to start a seizure, and then it subsides. And he was like, "Oh, I don't know what." And I was like, "I think we got to look into pain in the neck here." And so thank you for that, Mark. That's really, really helpful.
Well, it's true. And you know, but we've got to be careful with myoclonus, because for people who are worried now, there are 2 times we, like as people, we get myoclonus that's quite normal, and the same happens for dogs. The first would be hiccups. Hiccups are a type of myoclonus, and that is normal. So, you know, that's, if you imagine hiccup, your whole body kind of does that. And then, you know, you wait for a bit until the next one comes. Dogs get it. We get it. Nothing to worry about. The second one is just that best part of the day when you're just about to go to sleep. that sort of moment. I wish I could bottle it and just enjoy that experience every day, but just as you're going off to sleep, as you shut your eyes, your body will do a quick jerk and you're off to sleep. That is normal too. If you don't do it, you're abnormal. So everyone does it. Yeah. So that again is normal physiological myoclonus, and your dogs can do that too. So don't worry about that.
Yes.
I'm talking about more dogs when they're sort of awake and you see it, and like you've described with the landlord's dog. Yeah,
with the landlord's dog. No, so that's good. Just going back a little bit to the tremor, I know that there's often confusion about fatigue-induced kind of muscle-related movements. So is that the thing? So if you've got a debilitated arthritic dog, very weak in their back end, they've really lost quite a lot of muscle mass and muscle function, and they've gone for a walk and they've come back and they've started to develop a bit of a shake. Is that classifiable?
I think it is, and I wouldn't call that a tremor.
Okay.
So I think you're right. That is definitely something where you'll get. I mean, I don't know, even like fit people. I'm not fit, so I'm not going to be. A good athlete going out for a run. No, exactly. So I don't know why I'm talking about this. I'm the wrong person. But an athlete going out for a run, if they put in really hard day's work, at the end of the day, they're going to feel something in their muscles, and it might well be you see sort of some twitching, that sort of thing. That's fine. It's not always a bad thing. That's why I bring it up, because you're right. We see it in older dogs with reduced muscle mass. But, put it on the other end of the scale and take those really healthy, fit dogs that are out doing fly ball and agility and stuff. They're going to get it too, So, yes, it's a thing. Is it a problem? No, not necessarily, but it's there. And that's why seeing a sort of these muscle twitches, that's what I classify. Muscle twitches you're safe with, because until you know what it is, you can call it a muscle twitch.
I think that's one of the things that us mere mortal vets, always worry about. And key areas are like talking about behavior. You're like, oh my God, what term to use now? It's changed. I'm not allowed to use arousal. I'm not allowed to use conflict, all these sorts of things. And I think neurology is another one of those where we're so tongue-tied about the right word to use. So we're allowed to use twitch because that's not definable. It isn't classified. It means there's something there and we're going to look into it.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, no, it's great. Exactly.
Okay, cool. So think of another, because I think this is there's going to be lots of rehab people. There's going to be a lot of canine professionals, dog walkers, and owners and vets who are going to listen to this go, oh my God, these are amazing take homes. Can you think of any more?
Well, the other one, the one that I know people like talking about on here whenever I'm on, is lumbosacral disease.
Yes.
So I mean, I think if I go through tonight without talking about it, I'll be shot.
Yes.
But lumbosacral disease. Now, there's lots of ways I can. So, I suppose we're talking about conditions that. What was the question? We're talking about painful conditions, aren't we? That.
Well, we're talking about. First of all, we were doing like classic signs that make you go, "That got neuro." So before we went live, you'd said before, if you see dragging, then think neuro. Is that still? Do you still kind of stand by that statement?
A little bit. I think dragging was one thing, but I think that rather than dragging, I'd probably say drunk. If you see a drunken gait, that's neurological, because I think there are times when you'll get a dog dragging its legs and it may not be, it probably is the beginning of something neurological, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily that serious, because I know of dogs that come in and see me where they're dragging their claws a little bit, maybe in the snow or on the sand, you'll see it. So you're not immediately aware of it, but it's those times of the year when snow's on the ground or on the beach when you see them dragging their paws, you might start to get worried. So that in itself doesn't worry me if dogs are strong and jumping and doing everything else. But yeah, lumbosacral disease, that's a tough one, because lumbosacral disease is another thing that can get overdiagnosed, but also I think it can be underdiagnosed. It depends how you look at it. I think there's a lot of older dogs out there with lumbosacral disease, as there are a lot of people out there with lumbosacral disease. Yeah. Now, lumbosacral disease, for me, I think about it, you've got the spinal cord, it kind of, which way's which? That's way. So the head's up here, the spine's here, and the tail's down here. So the signals fire off in the brain, they travel down the spinal cord like an electrical cable. And that electrical cable then sort of fans out into lots of little wires, lots of little nerves at the base of the spine. Now, it's the nerves at the base of the spine there we're talking about it being diseased. What's happening is those little wires are being pinched by something. Now, in lumbosacral disease, there's a number of things that can pinch them, but mainly it's a disc being slipped. So a disc can slip up and pinch them. Or you can get arthritis that actually kind of, where the nerves come out, the nerve kind of comes out the hole in the bone like that, but it can actually start to pinch the nerve. Yeah. So the arthritic bone fills in that hole where the nerve comes out and causes pinching and then sciatica type pain. So that's lumbosacral disease. The signs of that would be a dog that when it stood still, so if you're just looking at the dog, a kind of severe case of lumbosacral disease is a dog that will stand there with maybe one leg off the ground, right, or not necessarily off, just literally not putting it to the ground. So it's kind of almost just floating it above air a little bit. Sometimes they can be kind of toe touching. So they're putting that leg down on the ground, but intermittently, not really putting weight through it. But the remarkable thing is you can see these dogs where they're holding their leg right up. They've got the worst lameness you've ever seen because they're holding it up. But then if they walk off, they look okay. You know, there's no lameness at all, or at least it's very hard to detect the lameness when they walk off. So for me, lumbosacral disease is always a warning for those dogs where they're really lame when they're at rest. And the reason I think they do that is I think these dogs potentially are having some form of sciatica type pain down their leg. So shooting pain.
This is really close to home. One of the reasons that CAM started was because of my dog. And I've got a total confession. So anybody that at the moment is suffering, feeling guilty that they detected their dog's condition late, me. And I think 10 years ago, we didn't talk about lumbosacral as much. I think it really is much more topical. And between you and me, when I really was, there's something wrong, and I did the x-rays, the spondylitic bridge was significant. And I look back, and she had told me there would be occasions that we'd be playing, and she'd just stop, sit down, and hold a back leg. It kind of go claw-like, and then it'd pass, and she'd be off again. But for me, her tail dropped. She tilted her pelvis. She really protected her lower back in movement. And I was like, oh my God. So anybody that feels guilty, don't, because person here made that mistake. But we managed it very well, and she made it to 16. So don't be disheartened.
Well, you know, and I think that's really common. And something you've mentioned there, I really want to bring up, actually. You've mentioned spondylosis. And I think that's really important to bring up because, and I've got to be careful how I put this, but I think spondylosis is a diagnosis. And you know, we're talking about lumbosacral disease. So in lumbosacral disease, you get huge spondylosis. That's the arthritic bone forming around the base of the spine, and it pinches the nerves. But I'd always warn people to be a bit careful of seeing spondylosis as a disease in its own right, because actually spondylosis in general is basically arthritic bone forming between the bones of the back. And I'll immediately say the breed boxer, because if you've got a boxer dog, your dog probably, if it's over the age of 2, has probably got a lot of spondylosis. Now, I'd also hazard that if you've got a 2 or 3-year-old boxer dog, they're probably fairly lively. They jump around and things. So we see that as a fairly, I shouldn't say normal, because it's not normal for box dogs to get it, but because of how boxers have become how they are, they're very prone to spondylosis. And so I would say spondylosis doesn't, for me, ever cause big problems of pain elsewhere in the spine. At the base of the spine, the lumbosacral region, I think it can cause problems there. Higher up, it rarely does. So if ever you get told your dog has spondylosis on x-rays, radiographs, I'd always just try and look for other reasons your dog may be painful, because spondylosis is a very common condition. We have spondylosis. You know, we'll go into the doctors, get an x-ray of our chest maybe, and they'll see spondylosis in our spine. They won't do anything about it because we're fine. But just be cautious with
why does spondylosis form? Because people will be like, well, you know, why isn't it causing a problem?
It's a really good question, and it's not well known. But I think the theory I've heard that makes most sense is you've got the bones of the back, and in between there's a disc. Now, the disc is a bit of a ligament, and what can happen with any ligament in the body is it can tear. Now, if it tears at the top of the bones where the spinal cord is, then you get the horrible things like slip discs and so on and so forth. But what often happens is it tears below. Now, when it tears underneath, there's no structures down here we need to be worried about. So we're sort of talking just in front of your vertebral column. There's no structures there that don't get me wrong, there's big structures there, but there's nothing there that the bone's going to impinge into that's going to be a problem. So what can happen is you can get little tearing of the ligaments over time. And when a ligament heals, it gets bigger, it hypertrophies, so it thickens. And then over age, what they reckon is sometimes you get calcification in there as well. So it starts to calcify, of calcification being new bone is arthritis. So you get all this arthritic bone form. So there's definitely mobility in the spine. That's causing mini ruptures of the ligament of the disc. and then you get lots of bone forming in its place. So in itself, it's not a worry. Now, the reason I say that is the nerves and stuff are all above the bone up here. So your nerves that could get trapped are all up here, while all the bone's forming down here. So I don't tend to worry about spondylosis when it's in the lumbosacral region. So I said a dog with a marked lameness at rest, that's a sort of warning sign for lumbosacral disease. But there are a few others that might help, because I appreciate if you have seen that, I don't want you now just to panic that it must be that, because there are other things it could be. But if your dog is showing that sign, the other things I'd be wanting to look out for as warning signs for lumbosacral disease would be a difficulty jumping or climbing stairs. That's really important. So jumping in the back of the car is a really good example. If you're finding you're having to help your dog in and out of the car more, that could be an indication they're getting weakness to the back legs. Pain is another one, but not just pain. I actually mean yelping. So yelping is quite, if you've got a dog that's yelping, for me, that's more likely to be neurological than it is orthopedic. Now, you definitely get dogs with orthopedic disease that yelp, absolutely. But I just think as a rule of thumb, when it's a yelp, it's more likely to be a nerve type pain, a shooting pain, rather than the kind of bone on bone type pain or joint pain that we see in dogs with orthopedic disease. So they're the things I'd be looking at more that are just a little bit helpful to help. And of course,
and maybe licking and chewing feet.
Yeah, definitely. So sort of really going at their feet, I suppose, is a possibility. And toileting, so incontinence is another one. So if you've got dogs that are starting to become incontinent, where they dribble urine or they drop motions without being aware of it, that generally develops quite a bit later on, but it's something to be aware of. That if you see that could be a sign of lumbosacral disease. But really importantly, there's loads we can do about it nowadays.
Yes.
So if you have got these signs, you might be listening going, well, actually, some of this does sound like my dog. And your dog may be 3 or 13, they can develop this at quite a wide range. There's loads we can do. And that starts from fairly minimal sort of stuff like medication just to keep them comfortable and things. And in a very old dog, that's probably what I'd be recommending, because this is a disease that slowly worsens with time. But if you've got a 15-year-old Labrador with this problem, then actually medication is probably going to be brilliant, because you're probably keeping them comfortable enough that they'll just get through and have that comfortable end to their life that they need. If it's a 3-year-old Labrador, then there's techniques such as surgery we can look at. And it depends who you speak to. It comes back to what I said at the beginning about our new movement referral practice. It depends where you go as to what you're offered.
Yes.
There are you get disc replacement things. You get people who put in lots of screws, cement, these spaces to separate.
Try to disarticulate and expand the space.
I don't like them. I have to say it's my opinion. And I think it's fair to say whoever you had on here talking about it, no one could argue that one way is right. So I should say that. But my opinion personally is the biggest problem is the nerves are being pinched. So we've got quite a... we do a procedure called a foraminotomy, where we literally make the hole where the nerve comes out a little bit bigger. It's much less invasive. It's still a big surgery. I mean, it's huge, but we're not putting huge implants in. And these dogs tend to get back to activity.
I've got another story of that. So Mike Taggart, isn't it? From
Target. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So followers, another mistake Hannah made, because everybody needs to learn from my mistakes. So there's me with Holly, the love of my life, and I'm thinking, what do I do? What can I do? What are my options from conservative to interventional? So I got her MRI done, her X-rays, I sent it all up to Mike Target, and we were discussing doing a foraminotomy. And he was very great. He was perfect. And he said, and just by the way, look at the weight of your dog. So from the X-ray, he could see that she had a little bit too much fat on her over her dorsal spinal process. I felt this big. I was like, so even people like me have to have the advice, because you can be blinded, can't you? You can be so focused. You forget about all the other factors that will influence that disease. So no, that's cool. I need to talk about a myth, bridging spondylosis. Now, depending on who you talk to, there is a lot of disagreement about this. And there is discussion that when the spondyle begins to really solidify at that point where it's bridging, but there could be movement, people talk about that could be more painful. What do you think?
I don't know if that's any different. So I think there's the term bridging spondylosis simply means the bone, as you say, is formed across from one vertebra to the other.
Yeah.
For me, it's the same thing as spondylosis. I suppose some people say bridging is when you've got 2 or 3 bones traversed by this new bone. So you get maybe 3 or 4 vertebrae that kind of join together in this one big solid bone. I still stand by the fact that I don't think spondylosis is that significant. Now, all right, I know if I've got a lot of neurologists on this call and they were listening to me, they'd be able to find a time when it was painful, and I don't deny that. But I think as a general rule of thumb, my thinking is if I ever find spondylosis on a dog, I keep looking for the cause. If that dog's painful, I keep on looking. I don't stop there, because invariably I will find something else in that dog that's making them painful. And the spondylosis is what we call the incidental finding. It's just, it was there, it was found, but let's move away from it and think of other things. So I personally, bridging spondylosis, it's called spondylosis defermens. It's called, there's disseminated something or other there's loads of words for it. But actually, and this is something really important, talking of terminology, that spondylosis, you also get a condition called discospondylitis.
Yes.
So rather than osis, it's itis at the end. And so for people listening, itis is very much about infection. That's an infection of the disc space. Now that is a worry, and that's a very, very different thing completely to spondylosis. So spondylosis is arthritic bone forming in those spaces between the bones of the back, whereas discospondylitis is infection in between the bones of the back. And that, well, needless to say, an infection in your spine is horrible. And that is very, very different indeed.
Perfect. Okay, and then a final thing that I think would be lovely to clarify, and I find it quite confusing, so I'm doing this partly for myself. You talked about lumbosacral disease. We're dealing with the cord equinus. So we've got the spinal nerves, and that's them being pinched upon, and therefore the neuropathic pain being generated. When you have a disc slipping further up the spine, maybe a thoracolumbar region, what is generating the pain? Is it the spinal nerves as they're leaving the foramina being pinched, or is it actually pressure on the spine? Because there's a bit of confusion about that, isn't there?
Yeah. I think probably it's a little bit of both. So the nerves definitely can be pinched from the disc slipping. And generally when a disc goes, it tends to go more left or right. Now, I'm not very good at demonstrating this, but if you look at the spinal cord in straight on in cross section, it's a big round circle, and you've got a nerve either side that comes out. So when a disc goes up, it doesn't tend to go straight up the middle. It tends to go off to one side. So you can imagine if you're going off to one side, it's pinching the nerves.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that you get. But having said that, in people, that's exactly what happens. In people, it's all about the nerves at the side being pinched. And you may be aware that in people with slip discs, it's very rare for us to become paralyzed, whereas with dogs with slip discs, when they're severe, paralysis is something we see quite frequently. And that is because the disc is going up and it's pinching the spinal cord, which is the big electrical cable, as I've said, from the brain to the back legs. Now, I think the reason those dogs are painful from that, yes, it's the nerves, but it's also in the meninges. So that's the sac around the spinal cord. There's a lot of nerves in that meninges. And if you get any stretch or, I think stretch is the right word. If that stretches or gets irritated, that is painful. Like meningitis, for example, in both dogs and people is a very painful condition. And that's because you've got inflammation of this sac around the spinal cord that's got lots of nerves in. So for me, that's where the majority of the pain is coming from with these dogs with slip discs. It's the meninges being stretched. And so anything we can give to help that should really help.
So that leads me on to, we knew that we weren't going to follow the agenda.
No,
but because some of the questions that people are asking, it follows well into. So people are talking about would steroid injections for lumbosacral. I'm on a journey. This is Stacey Ely. I'll just put it up here. 10-year-old lab, elbow arthritis, spinal impingement. She's mentioned it up here before. What about the different analgesic approaches between inflammatory arthritis, so nociceptive inflammatory compared to neuropathic? And as said, we probably get 2 or 3 messages a day where people say, I'm following a pain relief protocol that my vet's prescribed. I'm not seeing any improvement. He seems the same. Can you explain to people how there are different requirements targeting those different tissues?
Yeah, I'll try. You made it sound a lot more complicated now. I don't know.
Sorry.
But no, well, look, the question that was asked there, it was by Stacey, wasn't it? She's asked about steroid injections in the spine. I'm really pleased she's asked that question, because I think steroid injections in the spine are very important in the diagnosis and potentially in the treatment. But what I mean is, if you've got a dog and you suspect lumbosacral disease, if you then inject a steroid around the nerves at the base of the spine, I like to do that because then, so I tend to do that, and I do it with all my lumbosacral cases, and then I send them away and I ask the owners to kind of allow their dogs to exercise freely to see what they do. And what I'm obviously hoping for is that dog will then go away and start to get back to its normal self, running around, jumping, doing stairs, things it didn't do before, and not showing any pain. Now, if they do that, obviously that's great. And for me, it tells me that we're on the right lines. We are looking that this dog has lumbosacral disease. So when we get to that point, the problem with an epidural steroid injection is they're meant to not last much more than 6 to 12 weeks. In practice, it might only be 3 or 4 weeks. So I'm definitely not giving it as a treatment. So I always make that clear to owners that, you know, you might go away from here and it might go brilliantly. You might think, God, that my dog's fixed, but it is going to wear off. Now, you can repeat the injection. That's the first thing you can do. The problem with that is, unlike with us, dogs would need an anesthetic. And so you're looking then at repeated anesthetics to inject a steroid. And there's a risk with injecting a steroid. So it's not a benign procedure. You know, you can have problems. But the reason I do it is as a screen to make absolutely sure we've got lumbosacral disease. And if we have, and if the dog then relapses, that's when I start talking to those owners potentially about surgery. It was Mike Target, you mentioned him. So Mike Target and myself and one of my colleagues, another neurologist, Sergio Gomez, we looked at these dogs with lumbosacral disease. And we looked at the outcome of these dogs long term. And we found we did 40 dogs, I think, from memory, something like that. And 38 of them did brilliantly. They never looked back. They got loads better. But 2 of them didn't do very well. Now, when we followed those dogs and did a bit more investigation, we realized that actually maybe we got the diagnosis of those dogs wrong at the beginning. So we put them through a surgery that maybe with hindsight wasn't the right thing to do. That's why we introduced this epidural steroid measure. It's just a way of trying to screen dogs before we go on with a major surgery to make sure it's the right thing. So that would be where I put steroid injections. And I think if you're going to go ahead with lumbosacral disease, I think it's a good idea to do the steroid injection. Some dogs don't respond. And I'll say that now, you know, you get some dogs where they don't respond, but you still can't find a cause. In that case, I still may consider surgery, but the owners are just kind of more informed going into it. You know, they're not going into it thinking this is definitely going to work. It's going to be great, you know, and I think it's important. Everybody knows what we're expecting before we go ahead with such a big commitment as spinal surgery.
And then just going back a little bit, conservative management is still a chief player as well, though, isn't it? In that weight control, lifestyle adaptation, strengthening exercises, you know, that is something to explore, because there's going to be many people out there that would not be able to afford referral, and you know, us stopping the conversation there is going to break their heart.
So 2 things you've said there that I have to say are massive. So first is pain relief. Absolutely. You know, there's so many different painkillers out there. They come at a whole range of different costs as well, but they can be really cheap. You know, it's not an expensive thing necessarily. So pain relief is vital. But the other thing, which I haven't mentioned yet tonight, and you know, it's criminal I haven't, is about rehabilitation. All of the conditions. I mean, I can't think of a neurological condition of the spine where rehabilitation, physiotherapy, hydrotherapy doesn't help. It's always going to help. There may be different types. I mean, you know, when I talk about hydrotherapy, you know, you can literally put a dog in a swimming pool and let it swim, or do sort of get one of these underwater treadmills. So like I always call it a treadmill in a fish tank, effectively. Yeah. Brilliant. But you see, some of those, the big swimming pool, you're not going to have a dog that's had spinal surgery go in a swimming pool. That's bad. But there'll be other types of hydrotherapy, like the underwater treadmill, which would be perfectly appropriate. So finding a physio or someone who's got the expertise in rehabilitation with any of these conditions is so important. And it's never wrong. Never, ever wrong.
No, absolutely. But you definitely need a good working relationship. You need clear communication. You need to have a plan and targets. You need to see improvements, you know, that sort of thing, I think is really important. And you've got to be flexible. So my dog, Holly, was weird in that she should have been better on a treadmill. But actually, we found that straight line swimming, she was much more comfortable. She couldn't turn swimming. So in a big pool, that was too much for her. But her facial expressions, her enjoyment, the way that she came away from the exercise. So there is flexibility in looking at what is happening during the session and what is the result of the session, and work with your physiotherapist to adapt. Quick little kind of red flag. The same happened when like Librela came out. You said when you put the steroid injection in the spine and then you encourage them to exercise freely, you don't mean get the whole ball chucker out and start lobbing it up and down the hills 100 miles an hour again, do you?
No, and I mean introduce it sort of slowly over a few days, and it's playing it by ear, isn't it? So you know, little by little, and hopefully you'll find that your dog's managing better as the week goes on. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's like me getting up to run a marathon. Nobody wants to see that.
Nobody wants to see that, because that was what happened. Like when Librela came out, they had so many dogs that actually were doing really well on it and going back to crazy level of exercise and then dipping. They've actually got guidance of introducing exercise slowly now, so it's really important, guys. Right, considering that we're completely tangented, but I think this is actually really good because we're getting some really good take homes for people. Shall we go back to the actual title of using the smartphone, because this isn't just for neurological cases, it also applies massively for orthopedic, and all of us now have got our phones. And get off Facebook, well no, just watch Cam, and start using your phone for what it's capable of. What do you mean by this?
Yeah, so I think this has changed. This is the one thing that I think has changed how we do veterinary medicine in the last 5-10 years, well 10-15 years now. It's changed things massively. What owners see at home, so the people listening, you will always see your dog, and I want to bring cats in here. Cats are important, sorry Anna, but you see your dog or your cat having problems at home. That's where they're in their own environment, they're rested, they're doing everything. You know, you're going to see their most normal behavior at home. And if they're not showing normal behavior at home, that's your first clue that something's not right. So there's nothing wrong. And actually, it's incredibly helpful to film what it is you're seeing. Yeah. I get videos of dogs that are kind of asleep with maybe tremors or twitches or whatever you want to call them. And of course, people are worried about that. But we can't recreate that in the clinic, in the hospital. You know, you can't take your dog into a consult and describe that well enough, whereas a video shows you everything. So it's really important for episodic disease. And it comes back to lumbosacral disease again. I mean, for me, lumbosacral disease, those dogs can look really, really normal in the clinic. But if you're filming the times when you've seen the lameness, it might then become apparent to us, well, actually, that's always when your dog stood still, resting, that we're seeing the lameness. You know, if you're out running, it's not. So videos for me are vital. And the other thing, so with cats, they don't walk around. They don't you know, we take our dog for a walk. If anyone took your cat for a walk, they'd think you were bonkers. But so any gait disorders in cats, you can never see them in a vet practice. I mean, if you've ever taken your cat to the vets, they hide under the table, they might jump in a bin. You don't see them walking around like a dog would. And so filming what they're walking like at home is so much better. And these things really help. You then get to see, is the gait drunk in appearance? So, you know, if a dog is looking a bit drunk, it helps. You get stiffness, you get the weakness, you get a lameness. It might be you've got your dog in the clinic and the vet's looking at it going, your dog's lame in its right foreleg. And you're going, but I'm sure it was the left front leg last night. And maybe it was. But if you've done the video, you can look back and your vet can have a look and go, you're absolutely right. Your dog was lame last night in the left front leg and it's lame in the right front leg today. But that's telling us something. That's a really helpful clue, because there are many conditions where you get lameness in all the legs at different times. And that really helps us to narrow it down as to what's going on.
So this is post-COVID. So do you remember when we had COVID and everybody was in lockdown and suddenly overnight we all weren't allowed to come and work and we were locked at home on our computers, suddenly trying to work out how to do teleconsults. And I can remember the array of photos and videos that we'd receive, and no one had had any training, including the public. And I'd have photos of the ceiling, you know, there'd be supposed to be a photo of the eye and all you'd see is a toe and you'd be like, this isn't working for me. Please tell them what you want and how, because getting a 3.5 minute clip when you've got a 15-minute consult isn't going to necessarily be helpful. What can people do?
Okay. Well, exactly. You know, you don't want to see up someone's nostril. That's not good. But that's part of the reason our new practice is called movement, because it is all about the movement. So with a dog, I mean, it may be best if there's two of you, great. You just get one person to walk the dog on a lead, sort of away from the camera, back towards the camera. And if you can, left to right across the screen, just so you can see. So it's kind of a forwards and back, left and right. So 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And a walk is always more important. Don't worry about the dog running or anything like that. It's walking. Having said that, if it is a problem where you only ever see it when the dog's running, that's fine. You know, take your dog to a field, let it run off and try and film what you're seeing as it's running away. I'm not worried about any testing. You know, I don't find videos where someone's examining a dog very helpful at all. So, you know, and vets are guilty of this as well, if I'm honest, you know, because, you know, we learn in our training, we learn all these fancy tests you're meant to do for a neurological exam. But I find watching is so much more helpful than actually doing. So observing dogs is so much more helpful. But it's all about the movement. Don't worry about anything else. Or indeed, if it isn't about a lameness or whatever, and it's just something you're seeing, just try and capture that moment when you can. And, you know, you may say, it's so brief, I can't capture it. And I know that. I know that there are episodic movements and things we get in dogs. And you'll ask an owner to go away and video them. And they'll be there for like 2 hours trying to capture it, you know, with a big 2 long hour thing. And then they'll send you the 2-hour video. But you're like, well, no, it doesn't matter. Because if you're struggling that much to get it, don't be too worried about it. You know, I think if it is something that's a problem, you should be able to capture it. Even I would be able to capture it. And I'm not very good with my phones. So please don't worry if you're going away and you're finding it hard to get hold of a decent length video of this. It suggests it's not as serious as maybe we'd first worried about.
Yeah, definitely.
That's where I'd come from.
Yeah, and I think I'd had to try and be ground level rather than from a random oblique angle above, etc., where you don't even get to see the foot placement. Do you know what? Since I only really work with dogs on the floor now. I don't pop them on the tables, and I just put a mat down. The amount of people that can't bend down. It's, you know, we have got a musculoskeletal crisis in the human sector because no one can kneel down on the floor anymore. So, but yeah, be on ground level, because that's what we're interested where the dog is, not where you are. Short clips. You know, when you're in a consultation, I hate to say it, the vet sector is under a huge amount of pressure at the moment. You know, rammed consults, limited time, huge responsibilities, frayed nerves. Coming in with 20 minutes of footage to a 15-minute consult, it's just not going to work. So most phones now allow you to edit down the clip that you need. Try and, as you say, make it 20 to 30 seconds. Maybe break the clip up. You can duplicate the video and take clips so you can show Mark the relevant sections succinctly. Go prepared, because it is massively important. And
I've had some brilliant videos like that, actually, where people, I mean, it's proper like Steven Spielberg moments that I get. And I'm not expecting this at all, but you do, where people have like said, well, you know, I see a left front leg lameness here, and you get 3 seconds of it. And then they clip and they go, but when my dog's asleep, it's doing this. And then 3 seconds of that. And that's amazing.
Yes.
But you know, that isn't, I mean, if you can do that, brilliant. That is, well, it's more than helpful.
It really is, because the time pressures are really harsh now, you know, and trying to work as a team. I'm writing a lecture at the moment about the vet-client relationship and improving communication, and it is a two-way street, you know. So the vet sector, yes, we're really trying to be more empathetic and client-based care, etc. But you owners as well, make it easier for us. I wanted to take advantage of just the last 10 minutes. We do talk about cats. We had a whole month about cats. The only reason we haven't got a website about cats at the moment is because we haven't found our fairy godfather that's going to fund it. Bear in mind that the current website's cost us £17,000. It's a really big undertaking. Let's have just 10 minutes respecting the cats, and how, with your knowledge, can you give owners of cats some things that you'd really like them to know to flag up that cat needs veterinary attention?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because arthritis is definitely a condition of cats too. And I think all of us here listening, and the two of us, we'll all admit that cats are so much harder to read as to what's going on. And cats have this incredible tolerance to put up and shut up right to the bitter end. And it's only at the very end of their disease that they start to show the signs. And that's, I mean, what tough cookies they are, but that makes it really unfortunate. For me, with neurological conditions in cats, I think you have to look at things such as, what can they do? So jumping. We know cats are brilliant at leaping up to high levels. So they can be on top of wardrobes, they can be in trees and all of this. If you have a cat that stops doing that, then we've got to start thinking why. Now, it could be that your cat is 21. That would be a very good reason as to why it can't do it anymore. But if you've got a 3-year-old cat that suddenly stopped doing that maybe is a bit more of a reason to be worried. So think about those nice places your cat likes to go. And if it stops doing that, maybe there's a reason for that might require some veterinary attention. Appetite and things, I suppose, any changes in appetite, that's really important. Neurological conditions are really tough in cats.
They're really tough in cats, aren't they? Because
they yelp. Dogs yelp, so they tell you, but cats, you really can't. One thing I'd be cautious of with cats is when you examine them, and vets do this, they'll examine along their back looking for pain. Now, that works really well in dogs, but in cats, they're very good at having this like really excessive twitch response. Now, that's normal. And I know a lot of cats, they'll be off color. The vet will feel down the spine, and the cat will be sort of twitching its back, and then there'll be some thought there's some kind of back pain in the cat, and that's not always the case. So be cautious of things like that. That big twitch of the muscles isn't always that you've elicited, that you've pushed out, isn't that normal?
No, I can remember. So the ISFM have that triangle, don't they, where it's owner observations, clinical examination, and diagnostic imaging, and you're trying to bring the triangle smaller and smaller to hit your diagnosis. But because in cats, diagnostic imaging doesn't always happen, they definitely go for less further investigations. The article I was reading was saying that you have to make the triangle smaller from the client observations and the clinical exam, and then that's where these analgesic trials have certainly taken place, isn't it? Because they're a lot harder to clinically examine, and therefore treating and seeing response is acceptable, because it's better than doing nothing, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think the other thing I'd say with neurological conditions in cats, it might sound a bit negative what I'm going to say, but if your cat has a neurological condition, you'll probably find out quite quickly. And what I mean by that is if your cat's been showing some odd behavior for a year or 2 years or 3 years and it hasn't really worsened, I'm not that worried. I'd probably say, well, you're probably okay. It may not be normal what your cat's doing, but it's probably normal for your cat. Whereas neurological conditions, they do progress quite rapidly. So if your cat isn't jumping up onto the wardrobe and you're thinking, oh God, that means, it's a problem. If that's been going on for some months now and your cat's still otherwise well, that's great. I'm quite happy with that. So it is about progression and time. We talked about it with dogs earlier, and it's relevant for cats, is there are plenty of people out there that can't afford doing MRI scans and all these neurological workups. But I say to people that time is almost as good as is almost as good as an MRI scan. Because sometimes just waiting and seeing what signs develop will allow us to understand what the condition was. All right, I'm speaking the past tense because time's passed, but maybe there wasn't anything we could do. And those people that can afford an MRI scan, great, they're informed today. But it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong for your pet. To just sort of monitor and give pain relief and see how things are. And then a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, we may be able to say, well, it does look like your dog did have a slip disc, but we can kind of go, well, we've done everything right for it, because we've put it on pain relief and things like that. So don't be afraid of saying you can't afford things. It's fine. There's so many things out there we can do nowadays. And just because they're available doesn't mean we have to do them. And I like with every, and I know you're the same, Hannah, whenever you see an owner, you will give them sort of the options and you'll have like, this is possibly like considered the best option at the top through to like the least, what's the most we can do, the least we can do, and what the costs are of all of them. And very often I find the owners that can afford everything, when they think about it and they realize the reasons for and against doing it, a lot of them will opt for one of the less expensive options because it's the right thing to do for the dog or the cat.
No, definitely. And I think, as you say, as long as we are thinking of the animal's welfare, and we've covered bases such as pain control, vulnerability to further accidents and injuries. That's me and my lifestyle. I have to put it in there. I think, you have got time. And I think being a caregiver to somebody that can't speak brings huge panic, because you want action. You want it to be resolved. You don't know how bad it is. But I think trying to give people a bit of a peace of mind that you can go slow, and you do have the permission to check in with your vet regularly, ask them questions, go back to them, ask for clarification, see the nurse. It does break my heart when I see people write on our forums, oh, my vet wasn't interested. And I think vet probably was probably just really stressed, and probably had 16 blood reports to do and 4 owners to phone. Give them a second chance, check in and just say, I wasn't quite clear what you said. Can we have a chat again? Something that's becoming more commonly practiced is actually going in without your pet, so that you can completely listen. Leave the children at home, put your mobile phone away, and talk with your vet, and use that 15 minutes to actually get the information that you need. So don't be shy to ask for things. Which leads me nicely into reviewing your recent career change, because with the rise of the independents, we are there to provide service provision. We want to do the best for our clients. So just as we end, Mark, for the people that joined us, didn't hear at the beginning, tell us what you're up to again.
Yeah, so I've co-founded this movement, referrals, and we're independent veterinary specialists in the Northwest. So for those that didn't hear, we specialize in orthopedics and neurology. So everything we've talked about tonight and loads more, the things we can cover off at the practice. We do have people traveling from all around the country. So there's no reason, wherever you're based, as long as you're in the UK. I mean, you can come from outside the UK, but that's a long visit. And probably if you're outside the UK, you've got much nicer weather than we have. But you can come over and be seen by us. You need a referral from your own vet. That's the only thing. But usually that's very straightforward. I mean, if you speak to your own vet and say, I know my dog's got arthritis, but I'd like to go and speak to someone at our practice, they're normally very, very happy to say yes. And all they need to do is drop us a quick line, an email, or a phone call to say, we're happy for them to come and visit you. What you were saying, Hannah, is about this time and chat. I find sitting down and chatting to people in the consult so helpful. I mean, actually, one of the advantages we have is we have a long time to sit down and talk. And I completely have to echo what Hannah said about veterinary time, that in general practice, it is very hard to listen for the amount of time that you need to listen to make sure everybody understands what the plan is. So we do have the luxury of that. And very often what we'll do is we will see cases with arthritis, with neurological conditions. And it won't be unusual that at the end of the consultation, we may not do anything else. We may go, well, actually, what your vet done is really appropriate. But what we've been able to do is add colour to their thoughts to make people realise, that's why we've chosen. But equally, there are plenty of other options to investigate too. So that's what we do as specialists, really. It's important to differentiate that we can talk a lot more in depth about particular conditions. Now, I'd be absolutely rubbish if it came to like a dog with a medical condition. If it was vomiting or had diarrhea, all these things that your dogs get from time to time, I'd be the world's worst person to speak to. But then if it's neurological, then I can actually sit down and probably have quite a helpful conversation in that way. So that's what we're up to. So we are independent, and we've only been open 6 or so weeks. So we'd be very happy to see your dogs if they had any problems. And there's a good number of us there. Some very good orthopedic surgeons, John Innes, Ben Walton, and Mark Morton, who are 3 that are there. Which, if you look the names up, if you don't know them already, they're very
names.
They do.
Big names. So anybody that has done any of the CAM courses will know that we talk about the Liverpool Osteoarthritis in Dog Study and how it's a key tool. It's a key tool used globally. John Ennis and Ben Walton, big names. Before you go, I can't let this one go. So this is from Sharon, and she follows us a lot. And I missed it. Can we just tackle this quickly? Sorry, I just joined. Talking about LSD, have you ever come across what appears narcolepsy tendencies without collapsing? So the dog loses muscle tone. I have a 3-year-old golden retriever. We're struggling with lumbosacral disease. Has been suggested due to an episode of cold tail. Can we help her at all?
Yes. I'm not sure it will have much to do with lumbosacral disease, but you know, this is a great example where videos help. This is huge. So you're mentioning that there's some kind of cataplexy tendency. So for people who don't know, that's where you get a sudden loss of muscle tone. You kind of just collapse, but then suddenly, you know, muscle tone is regained. Cataplexy is something we see in dogs. Not very common, but we do see it. So I would suggest you you get some videos. I'm happy to have a look at them. I really am. I mean, you can email me. You'll find my email online, or you can send them to our email address at Movement Referrals. If you go on the website, you'll see. I'm very happy to have a look at those and have a look. And in conjunction with your vet, we can have a look and see if I can help more. But it wouldn't surprise me if there was cataplexy going on. If there is, I'd say cataplexy is actually surprisingly benign. It's nothing we worry too much about, provided your dog is otherwise having a good quality of life and getting on with things. So I wouldn't limit your dog's activity. I'd do everything normally, and hopefully your dog should be fine. But it's always nice to get a name for some of these weird conditions, so you can just rest assured all's good. But yeah, feel free to drop me some emails with the videos if you can. I can have a look.
Amazing. So I want the 19 people that are currently watching and who haven't dropped off to say thank you, because Mark is just so eloquent, humble, kind, giving. It'd be really nice to show our thanks and tell us where you're listening from. Until I pin you down again, which will probably be another year, knowing how busy you're going to be. Thank you so much, Mark. It's been a really, really good live with some really good take homes. I wish you all the best. Tell John and Ben and Mark that they are more than welcome to come back. The key with CAM is that we're happy to promote people's projects if it fits with improving the care of dogs and their sharing education. We don't allow people to come and do blatant plugs, but we do allow people to come in and show us what they're up to as long as they share knowledge. So please invite them. That'd be lovely.
Yeah, I will.
Perfect. All right. Till next time. See you later, guys.
Bye-bye.